Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating man. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Gertrude. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you and your audience today. I'm not too far off from you, actually. I'm in Elstonwick, which is not too far from your sunny suburb. So my name is Mike Davis. To tell you a bit about myself, I've worked in for-purpose leadership, executive leadership for about the past 8 years at various not-for-profits of all sizes in all industries. If I take you a little bit back further, and maybe I can explain a little bit how I got into entrepreneurship and investing as well, that might be a little bit easier. My first entry point into the job market was actually studying business. And I must say, I liked management, but I never quite found my niche in business other than my last subject, corporate social responsibility, back in 2004 was one that I really loved and always thought that business had a role to play in solving massive social problems, and have always really followed that as a through line in my career. Now, after university, not finding my niche in business, I studied law and loved that intellectually, and I'm still big into philosophy and stoicism in particular, but learned a lot about how the system works. And I was really keen to try and understand how social issues make their way through the system. What's the role of government? What's the role of law in our society? How do we protect groups that need protecting? And how do we get just outcomes in the world? After I did my Judge's Associateship, after my law degree, I went into policy, health and social policy, which for me was really interesting. And being the son of two public servants, career public servants, I've always sort of wanted to focus on, that civic good as well as economic good. So that very much nourished that part of myself. And going into government, working in DHS and health and social policy was a really interesting experience for a couple of years, but found myself in that funny position where you've got a lot of big ideas, but you don't have the seniority to have much influence yet in your career. So I started my own business. It was about 2016. And after a couple of years in the public service and being a little bit burnt out, I started to think, what kind of impact do I want to have in the world and what's my real purpose? And I really landed on the idea of purpose-driven business being what is the next wave of thing to come for me and for society, and very much encapsulated in the B Corp movement, corporate citizenship, corporate social responsibility, social impact. So I had this big idea that all businesses, government, and not-for-profits will need to upskill in how they think about purpose and impact. So I started a little consultancy and my podcast, Humans of Purpose, which I still run today and now 312 odd episodes in. So for that business, that was a really interesting opportunity to never run a business before, but just thought I'd give it a shot. And I thought, I think I'm somebody who's able to problem solve quite well for my time in law. So using a framework that I developed, I worked with a number of businesses ranging from global multi-billion-dollar law firms to develop social impact strategies and strategic plans, to working with small grassroots not-for-profits like around gender equity and engineering to help come up with plans, social impact measurement plans, social impact reporting, and really found a niche there. Ran that for a few years, and I'm not sure if any of you listening might have had this happen before, but sometimes in life you can be juggling too many balls and you got to drop one. So at the time I was running my business, my podcast. I had a part-time job in a not-for-profit to help me supplement my income in the same sort of social impact measurement and strategy space. And I just couldn't do everything all at once. I think my limit is about 3 balls in the air. So I reluctantly, after a couple of good years, closed the consultancy. As a pretty much a sole operator, it was very hard to keep bringing in business and being the marketing machine and PR machine and doing the actual project work plus the lead gen and the marketing. So I decided that really I could have a greater impact with the podcast, and that's proven to be a good choice. The podcast since has gone on to win several global awards and to be one of the few independent podcasts in the top 10 management category in Australia, and pretty high up in the business category too. So very proud of what we've achieved through the podcast. And after some time as a head of strategy in the first not-for-profit in drug and alcohol, I realised that that's what I was meant to do, was really to help executive leadership groups and CEOs and boards make good decisions, apply startup thinking frameworks and methodologies, and bring a lot of the business and entrepreneurial thinking skill sets to places where maybe they weren't as common. So that's been a through line. After my time in the not-for-profits, it was called Task Force. It's now merged with Windana. I went back into consulting for a bit, which was good. And then most recently have worked in technology for social justice at Info Exchange, which is a social enterprise not-for-profit in Australia. I'll soon be starting a role in January around gender equity at a major not-for-profit. It will be a GM of innovation role there, which I'm really excited about. And really, ties into some of my core beliefs and passions. My investing journey began probably earlier this year, actually. I became very interested in the idea of venture capital and investing in startups. Didn't know much about it, but having had so many dynamic and game-changing startups on the podcast, I thought here's a great opportunity to learn about how to mentor them, how to engage with the founders better, and how to help them grow really great businesses, whether they're startup or slower builds. So I was an inaugural mentor at State Library of Victoria's Start Space program, where I had the chance to mentor some wonderful young talented people. Loved mentoring, doing that, and then joined Blackbird's mentorship program called Giants. Blackbird is one of the biggest tech VCs and accelerators in Australia and globally. So I've really enjoyed being part of that program, still active as a mentor there. And now as part of the Wade Institute, my alumni role there, helping out with showcasing some of the great talent coming through the Wade Institute and helping some of those startup performers on their journey too has been great. During my time at Wade, I developed my own investment thesis. And so investment thesis is really a philosophy around what you invest in, why, and how you do it. I didn't have a lot of money. I'm an angel investor that relies primarily on the money that comes in through my podcast to make my investments. So it's not like I sit there and just say, okay, here's some family money, we're going to throw it all at startups, and there's a big stack of it. There's typically 5K to 10K checks in size, and looking for deals that really sit around that climate tech and health tech space that really have potential to generate exponential returns and impacts over a 10 to 20 year time horizon. So my thesis was very much around thinking about the role of AI in driving health tech innovation, artificial intelligence as a major disruptor in health tech, as an accelerating preventive care solution making, but also climate tech specifically. I mean, there's just so many, and Melbourne in particular, I think is a great hub of climate tech innovation. And I think solving or getting near to reducing climate impact is really one of the biggest things on our agenda as a humanity at the moment. So for me to really be more involved in that space is really a passion and very exciting. And it really blends for me that love of tech and innovation and the idea of solving a social problem, which is climate change. And health, I suppose, is similar in that way too. So the through line continues to this day around how do we solve social problems using business principles or entrepreneurial principles. It's just now that the way I think about it is not always the not-for-profit context. It is usually by way of my full-time job. But when I'm not working, I'm thinking about how can I make investments in companies that start up early stage companies that really have the potential to drive scalable change in society, both in Australia and globally. I like to think about underrepresented groups. I love working with female early stage founders. I like to work with people of colour who are early stage in their journey. We know that VCs are really underrepresented both in people and in investment in people of colour and women, particularly with early stage startup ideas. So I think there's an enormous market there and opportunity to really help these communities and drive their success forward and really make sure that we've got a far more representative group of well-funded companies out there doing amazing things. So that's the focus right now. I can say that having the opportunity to amplify the great work of these startups that I sort of find myself through various network events and opportunities is great. I get to meet them, put them on the podcast, to really do my own due diligence and amplification piece at the same time. And it gives me incredible access to early deal flow, information and intelligence about what these companies are doing, their prospects of success, get to understand the founder mentality. And I will say, I mean, one of my biggest learnings from doing this just for a short amount of time is that the people matter a lot, probably more than the idea. You can pivot a bad idea or an idea that's not right, but it's a lot harder to pivot a person's personality to work with a good idea that's already in place. So I'm a very relational person. I love trying to figure out how a person's going to go and what will probably be one of the hardest challenges of their life in getting a startup to market and then to scale. And yeah, I think my unfair advantage is having spent hundreds of hours with pretty successful people creating disproportionate impact in this world through the podcast and my jobs and partnerships in the sector. I think I've started to get a sense of what are the right attributes of founders that are really going to make things happen and what to avoid. And the podcast gives me a really good chance to really flesh that out too for other potential investors. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really loving my mix at the moment. I'd say if you had to think about what does a typical week look like for me, well, it's full-time work in an executive role, which can be anything from, it was at one stage for me, my last job, 7:30 in the morning till about 4:30 at night. School pick-up or drop-off of my young son, Marlo, and then looking after my beautiful mini Labradoodle Cyril, who you can see splayed out behind me. So we share the care of my young fella, and then the investing is on the side very much, in the podcast too. So podcast is a couple of hours a week, and just, you know, that's taken a long time to get it to that small amount of time per week to make it work. But yeah, I mean, the stuff that I do, I mean, I think, you know, my firm philosophy is that you should be doing work that you find fun, and then it's not really work. That's my hack that many other people have talked about before, but really big on trying to work in areas that I get excited about and would probably be interested in trying to solve if I wasn't doing them for money anyway. So yeah, that's absolutely critical in anything you do, and key part of it all.
Wow, Mike, what a journey you've been on. It's fascinating to listen to you speak, the different roles you've had, and now this entrepreneurial journey. Now, building strong relationships with key stakeholders is one of your strengths. Can you provide some insights into your strategies for cultivating and maintaining these relationships in diverse sectors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's always just been about being like very authentic and speaking the same way across all mediums. So you know, you might come across people who write really long, clunky emails or messages, and they speak a different way in person, and then you call them on the phone and it's different again. I try and maintain the same way of speaking across all platforms. I try and keep things clear and simple as much as possible. I try to speak slowly. I try and say exactly what I mean. I try to minimize confusion. I try and get to the point quickly, because I don't like to waste people's time, and I don't like to have my time wasted. So very, very conscious of being respectful of people's time and that they don't owe me anything. So I think the first step to recognize in relationship building with any stakeholder is that that person really could be doing anything else at the time other than speaking to you, and has a lot of serious priorities. So how do you really get to the meat of what you want to say and generate that interest quickly and politely? So try and think about, what does a 3-sentence email look like, or a 2-sentence email? If you can start to move to that sort of communication style where the intent is clear and the authenticity is built in, you're going to land at a good place, and you really just test and learn and adapt your approach at that stage.
So mentoring leaders and enabling teams to excel is also part of your expertise. What advice would you have for leaders seeking to foster a culture of excellence within their organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I always like to start with that question: Does culture eat strategy for breakfast, or who eats who for breakfast? Which one's more important? So you have your strategy heads and you have your culture heads. For me, I started out in strategy, but then I shifted very much when I moved to manage bigger teams into culture being very important. But the true answer is, it's a trick question. They both matter a lot. So I think getting a team together and building a shared sense of identity, behaviours, beliefs, goals, and desired outcomes are very important for identity creation of the team. Yeah. So I think a sense of culture in a team, building that, comes from establishing a shared identity and set of beliefs and purposes. So doing that really early, and then thinking about, how does your team with its own unique personality help the organisation thrive and fit into the organisation's broader culture, is a really good way to start. That would be my number one tip: is make sure you have you do the workshops, you have a really clear team charter. So make a team charter. It's like a 10 set PowerPoint after a few workshops that says, this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is what we're trying to achieve together. Here's what we do, here's what we don't do, and here's how we're going to get there in the next 12 months. And also, here are our key principles for how we operate in the organisation, in the team, and how we treat each other.
So as a podcaster yourself, how has your podcast, Humans of Purpose, influenced your perspective on purpose-driven organizations and their impact on society?
Well, look, call me biased, but I went into starting the podcast believing that purpose-driven organisations could really do a huge amount to change the world. I still do. I think it's really, what has changed is that most organisations these days now call themselves purpose-driven organisations. So you've almost got a bit of a drift in the who's who and the what's what. It used to be far more different categories of, you had your not-for-profits, your B Corps, your companies, but now it's very hard to tell who's a social enterprise, who's a purpose-driven business. And we're sort of have this condensed spectrum now where everyone in some way, just about any business will have a section where they tell you what they're doing for the planet or for good. And that's a really good thing. And it really means that, for me, there's a broader pool of people to talk to out there. And just for example, one thing that's changed in the podcast is that probably we used to do 70, 80% of the podcast would be a mix of not-for-profits, social enterprises, and they would be the main people on the podcast. Now you'll find that startups are also doing a lot of purpose-driven work, having a really significant impact, as are other actors in the system, like super funds are doing amazing things, mobilising capital for good, philanthropy. So I think it's a broader church, it's a wider church, so to speak. And I think there's that recognition that any organisation, no matter what form, can really contribute to purpose and impact. Yeah. So for me, the positive side of that is there's a broader pool of people to talk to, which is good for diversity, diversity of thought, background and opinion too.
That's so important. Very, very important. So your passion also lies in supporting purpose-driven organizations to grow and scale their influence and impact. Can you share some examples of organizations you've worked with and the positive changes they've achieved?
Yeah, look, I probably can't go into particular examples because under contract, there's confidentiality around a lot of those arrangements, but I can speak to ones where I've been almost an in-house consultant. So, Task Force would be probably my favorite example, where the CEO of Task Force just retired. Actually, he's moved to Torquay with his lovely wife. And when I joined Task Force, it was probably about 35 people, tiny office, no clear sense of direction or strategy, no real plan around measuring impact and whatnot. Very good purpose-driven organisation, but just without the real strategic bones or impact bones. So working with the CEO board there and a bunch of the staff and executive leadership team, coming up with their first strategic plan and their social impact strategy and social impact reporting for the first time, we were able to really help them grow from about 35 to about 140 people in recent times, and triple their revenue from about 4-ish million to about 15 million. And then, more recently to be acquired in a merger with Windana. So I think, being in an organization like that, helping to really do the structural and governance work around what is our purpose and how we're going to get there, what's our strategic plan look like, and how does our purpose manifest in the social impact that we want to have, was sort of critical for building government relationships, bringing in funding, philanthropy, and helping us to really commercialize service provision as well to really help us scale. So look, that's a good example. I think in other, I'd rather speak about probably my own experience maybe with humans of purpose might be a good way to talk, or purposeful, rather than speaking about consulting arrangements. But so for myself early on, building purposeful was really important to have a clear mission that was very different and a service offering that was very different to what anyone else was doing. So I think it's very much about being clear around that review process. Is my offering unique in market? How is it unique? Making sure it's very different to what everyone else is doing, if you're a small operator, was fundamental.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, your diverse range of skills. Curiosity and creativity are some of the driving forces in your life. How do you encourage and foster these qualities in your own career and when working with others?
Yeah, it's a good one. I love new ideas. I think they excite me. I'm the kind of person who probably would spend all day listening to podcasts and audiobooks and documentaries if you gave me the chance. Having conversations with as many folks like yourself, Gertrude, as possible, and learning as much as I can from people with different experiences. And that's ultimately why I started the podcast. And I think that for me has been a huge lever to opening up my own creativity and having that platform, getting that creative energy from other people and other ideas. Stoicism has been really important for me. So every day I get the Daily Stoic and also Stoic quotes on my phone. For those who don't know, Stoicism is a thousands of years old Greek Roman tradition of philosophy, where it's thinking about your life and doing doing what's morally right, and doing so according to the four virtues of justice, wisdom, courage, and temperance. So thinking about how to live a good life by the right principles. So that's helped me a lot, actually, in my philosophy and creativity, and shaped a lot of my thinking and behavior. It's been a huge shift. The curiosity through that, and also through writing. I've always been a writer. I've written for Pro Bono News for many years, and if you have a look on humansofpurpose.com, you'll see a whole bunch of articles that I've contributed to or written to, and also do that through the Hedgehog's Nest Substack, where I write each week a blog on something that's come up with the podcast. So these are things that have really enabled me to cultivate curiosity and creativity. And I think they're just so important in helping you to have a good career in life. Yeah.
So my last question for you is, again, going back to you as an angel investor. In your experience, what do you look for in startups and entrepreneurs when deciding where to invest your resources?
I think for me, I want to see in founders adaptability is really important. So, is
Yeah.
the person open-minded? Can they take feedback? Are they going to be able to pivot? Because inevitably you will if you're in a startup. So, I think that the trait that you'd call it if you were looking at the ocean or the big five characteristics is openness to change in different perspectives, the ability to take feedback without getting offended and actively seeking feedback is really important. And I think just that the last one would just be resilience. So do you believe that this person, if they suffered a few knocks, would still be able to stay on course and handle that? How gritty are they? How hardworking are they? Like, I always think about this mate that I have in the co-work space who's the first person to arrive in the morning and one of the last to leave, but the intensity that he works and he lives his life. I like to see a lot of intensity in founders because this is really, only a few % of early stage founders are going to succeed to any stage. So if I make an investment decision to write a 5K or a 10K check, I've only got that's crazy person odds to make an investment that's a few percentage chance to succeed. So to decide who's in that few % and who isn't, you need to look for a range of personality traits and characteristics, probably mostly like the ones I've described above. But finally, one that I like to talk about a lot that might be a bit new is swashbuckling. So, you hear about pirates who are swashbucklers, and, I think you need a good swashbuckler in a founder team. Is there somebody out there who can really get out there, do the heavy networking, the heavy lifting, high in energy, and really, as much as possible, make things happen for them and their organization?
Fantastic. Wow. Well, we've gotten so much out of you today, Mike. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing your wisdom with us. I really look forward to staying connected with you and catching up for a cup of coffee one of these days. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. A wonderful show and terrific audience. And it's been a pleasure seeing you again.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing you voices, stories from people from all over the world, sharing their knowledge, their skills, and their ideas. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely stay